You're listening to the So What? Why It Matters podcast with Nancy Hicks. Each week we'll ask the question, so what? And dive into the answers of why it matters with Nancy and her guest. Are you ready for some honest conversation about the so what's in your life? Here we go.
And we're off to the races. Welcome to our very first So What? Why It Matters podcast. I'm Nancy Hicks, and I'm going to be your host each week. Thanks so much for dropping by. Now, I love that this is the topic, better communication, that landed at the top of our heap of fabulous topics for our series that you can look forward to. Because communication touches every aspect of who we are as humans. We are always communicating. We are always sending out messages about who we are and what we need and who and what we love and why. In one form or another, we're speaking loud and clear in our bodies, in our faces, in our tone, in our writing, in our stillness or stiffness or stuttering and stammering attempts to say something just so accurately. We're communicating a whole world of who we are, and it matters. And here's why. Because communication is all about those moments where we convey an idea and you realize, hey, you're like me. Or, hey, oh my golly, I get it now. And there's this link, this joining together. And sometimes that joining together can take no time at all. For some people, they just go around connecting with the whole world. Their connecting is like one of their gifts. But for others, it can take a lot of time. And we've all had situations where we're just not connecting. We're not hitting it. We're not getting it, especially when we literally speak another language, not just our mother tongue language, our national language, but body language, love language, beliefs, philosophies. In theory, we love the idea of different forms of communication and styles and languages, but in practice, it can be very difficult. But as we grow in communication, we zero in on a higher level, the why. Why do you want to communicate? Well, I'll tell you why. Love. That's what life's all about, right? That's what we're here for. We are all here on this earth to give and receive love. And as a person of faith, I believe that God put us here to grow in love, to love and care for each other. We were born and bred for connection. We communicate to connect. And how we do that speaks volumes about how we connect with and love God. So, if you zoom out, you get this bigger, broader picture, right? We always want to remember the why. When it comes to communication, we're making a connection based on love. And we all need little reminders to zoom out every once in a while, to remember the big picture. So let me say it again. Communication matters because it's the expression of and foundation for how we love people well. That, the why, the so what, the loving people, the connecting, that is what will move you through the perils and styles and languages and expressions of communication when the going gets tough. So we've all been on the receiving end of poor communication, haven't we? Think about it. A crappy, punchy, judgy email. We've all felt in the dark at times because someone forgot to loop us in. We've all experienced someone saying, oh gosh, that's not what I meant at all. And don't even get me started on social media. My gosh. I mean, do we forget sometimes that there are real live people behind every single comment? Now, we know how poor communication feels, but it doesn't have to be this way. We're all communicating all the time. So let's just turn the dial ever so slightly so that we can become more effective communicators, AKA a person who can understand and love others just a little bit better. So communication matters. Why? Because people matter and we want to connect with people. So now the next question is how? Before I get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about my communication background. When I was a singer back in Canada, I was a classical singer. I sang lots of concert work, sacred music, gospel music, and I swung over and went into musical theater as well on main stages. And I always wanted to be a singer, and I also taught. I taught in the church, I taught Bible. I also taught private voice, like singing, for 14 years. And then we moved to the US, and there came a time that between our moving and my husband Cam's travel schedule, I really realized that moving back into performing, like in musical theater, for example, you perform 8 shows a week, and there's 2 on Saturday and there's 2 on Sunday. It became really apparent to us that this just wasn't going to work for our family schedule. And it was a real struggle for me. But I sensed God say to me, keep using your gift of music to serve where you can. And so a lot of my singing actually was just happening at the church, and we would have these events, and I would sometimes sing at them. So at one of these events, I was the singer that night, and the keynote speaker was a QVC host, and the MC that evening was a QVC host as well. So it was actually like this big fashion show, and it was a big outreach thing. And I was just having a great time as a singer and chatting with people, and I loved fashion, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the evening, both of those women approached me and said, you'd be great on QVC. And I remember thinking, why would I want to be on QVC? Of course, I didn't say this, but I remember thinking, why on earth would I want to be on QVC? I'm a singer. Now, here's the thing. At one point, I began seeing this wonderful psychologist. And I want to say a big shout out right now to industrial psychologist Dr. Tim Gilmore back in Canada, because man, did he have an impact on my life. And he did several days analysis of me, my strengths, my aspirations, my gifting, my experience, fit. And in the end, he just shot out all this data that reveals the careers based on other people's success in various fields that are perfectly matched to you. And he said to me, Nancy, you've got to stop thinking of yourself as a singer. It's not really a good fit for you family-wise. And there was like a 75% fit there. But there was like a 98% fit with, say, being a broadcaster. He said, you're not just a singer, Nancy. You're a communicator. Look at the things that you've done, teaching, preaching, speech competitions, singing. And one of the best fits for me was, again, broadcasting, for example. There were others too, but that was the one that stood out. And it opened up my whole world of communication. So I turned left and became an on-air spokesperson for QVC. And there's more to that story, but I did that. I was an on-air spokesperson with QVC for over 10 years when I sensed God saying to me, honey, all this communication background, we're going to take it and we're going to use it for you to become a Christian speaker, preacher. And that's the calling, which is what I'm living out today. I've been in communication my whole life, and I'm still working on it. You may actually be thinking, okay, fine, Nancy, how do we up our communication game starting today? So how can we improve our communication with other people and make sure, that we're being heard, but even more importantly, that we're hearing them, that we're hearing God? And the one thing I can tell you that makes all the difference in the world when it comes to better communication, and this is the thing you can land on today, is rule number 1, who's your audience? Listen, if I yell the word fire, what does that mean to you? Does it mean you're super passionate about something? Are you going to bolt out of your seat to escape a burning building? Well, it depends, right? It depends where you are. Well, the same concept holds true for the people you're trying to communicate with. On any given day, we're communicating with so many different people, our partners, our colleagues, our clients, our kids, our parents, and our friends. Just look at the last 3 people. I mean, seriously, take a look at your phone right now. Look at the last 3 people you texted. How much differently do you talk to each of those people? I mean, how embarrassing would it be if you sent a text meant for your husband to your boss? And by the way, I have to say, I've actually done that. But it matters, right? It matters. And understanding your audience matters. because it's up to us to craft and express our messages in ways that the other person can receive them and engage or connect with them. Okay, so let me tell you a story of when I worked on air with QVC. Who's your audience was really drilled into us at QVC. So, true confession. I had spent my life until I joined QVC trying to be aspirational. It goes right back to my childhood, and that's a story for another time. But I was one of these kids, teenagers, people who just always wanted to achieve, to impress, to dazzle. And part of it is a performer thing in me. And it's also a Nancy Hicks is scared to death of being unloved and unwanted thing. Nancy has her issues. I love to learn and study, and I have a high responsibility strand in me. And I'm sure some of that stuff's going to all come out as the episodes, unfold over these months and years. But I get on air and I have a ton of information, lots of fancy words and details and history. And I'm like really impressive, right? Okay, so at QVC, you work with lots of people who coach you. You get feedback real time, right? Like, are you actually connecting with the listener and are you selling the products? And you get tape reviews on a regular basis. So you're getting feedback and critiqued a lot. And one time I was told, Nancy, you're too inaccessible. I mean, do you know who you're talking to? This woman lives in middle America. She drives a minivan. Do you drive a minivan, Nancy? Do you have kids or a dog or anything? Tell her that. Relate to her. Keep things simple. She's not simple, but don't complicate her life. I mean, really? It was so simple. Frankly, it was too simple for me. I wanted to complicate it. I wanted to make it impressive. It was like, stop. Stop with your fancy words and all your ideas and all your history and all your information. Just stop and make it simple. Now, let me just pause here for a moment and just say, if you're thinking right now, yeah, but what about me? I mean, I want to know who I am. And you're absolutely right. It's not just about knowing your audience, though that's critical. The beautiful byproduct, right, of knowing other people, of understanding the world better and understanding primarily God, is that you actually will come to know yourself better. And so I want to just tell you that through all the episodes that we're going to be sharing, we're going to be unpacking a lot of helping you understand better who you are. So you can absolutely look forward to that. But let's come back to, again, focusing on who's my audience, who is that other person, right? Because people are fascinating. I mean, they really are. Think about your favorite books, movies, music that you love. I mean, they're about people, except for Bambi, but you get my drift. They're about how people are on a journey and how people have experienced fabulous, lovely things or some of the hardest and darkest moments of their lives. So it sounds kind of like a story, right? Highs and lows, lights and darks. And that's exactly what people are. They are stories, living, breathing, moving stories who are carrying a million more stories inside of them, just waiting to be revealed. From kings and presidents and politicians, all the way to the other end of the continuum, to people who've lost it all. Know your audience. Stay interested. Friends, I'm so excited to share with you that registration is officially open for my new course, Awaken. Awaken is for women who are fed up with walking through their lives half asleep with little to no purpose or direction. It's for women who are ready to shrug off the toxic expectations and limitations they've taken on from the church, loved ones, and themselves, and instead step into full, godly 3D womanhood. It's for those who are thinking right now, yes, I'm so ready to take off my mask, get honest, and live fully alive. This work won't be easy. It's going to get gritty and messy, but I guarantee if you stick with it, you'll come out on the other end truly awake and unmasked with a vision in hand that brings you joy, purpose, and direction. Join me this February for Awaken. Learn more and register for Awaken by visiting nancyhickslive.com/awaken or finding the link in our show notes. Understanding our audience gives us the empathy to put ourselves in their shoes. Like, gosh, I never thought of it that way. And how much more grace do we give other people when we place empathy in the middle of our relationships? I mean, what's it like to be you? What have you gone through? What's your story? I mean, how much kinder and gentler and more helpful we can be, right? When we begin to understand people and what they've gone through and who they are. Let me give you another example. For 4 years on Wednesday mornings, I'd serve in this homeless shelter. It's in our area. When I first started serving in this homeless shelter, the director and the volunteer coordinator only let me hang out with the homeless people for like about 3 or 4 months. All I did was I'd go in for about a couple of hours and I just moved from table to table and I would just hang out and I just connect. Now, what I wanted to do ultimately was to teach the scriptures, to bring devotionals and to pray with people. But for the first little while, all I did was get to know people. So this one day I sat beside a man who said to me, "What do you want? Why are you here?" And I said to him, "I love God and I love people. That's why I'm here." And here's what he said to me: "God, lady, don't talk to me about God. God's up in heaven and I sleep under a bridge." And I have to say, that kind of thing happened on a regular basis there. I would sort of wade in slowly because I knew that I needed to take the time to discover who the person was that was right in front of my face and understand and connect with their story just a little bit. I served people there that had their noses cut off, that were repeatedly raped, that grew up in poverty and only knew how to fend for themselves since childhood. I mean, they were one illness, one accident away from losing their job. And if they lost their job, they lost their home. And if they lost their home, they lost their family. What the heck did I know of that experience? Absolutely nothing. Like I said, we all have a million stories to share. So knowing who we're speaking to, knowing our audience really matters. So words matter because people matter. And I have to say, I'm aghast these days by communication conduct here in America. Here's what we're communicating. We can say what we want, communicate any way we like, and actually think as long as we have the right laws or right policies in place, it doesn't actually matter what we say or how we say it. Really? I mean, I'm baffled by those who call themselves Christians who seem to be conveying words don't matter, conduct doesn't matter. Really? Makes no difference if you're rude and condescending to people who think and believe differently than you, just as long as you sign on the dotted line for the right policy and theology. Really? You gossip and lie and say whatever you need to say to manipulate people, stir up a frenzy in people to get your way. And it doesn't matter. What matters most is that our policies and our theologies and our laws are aligned. Said Jesus, never. The most oppositional people to the ministry of Jesus were the religious people who were so caught up in the law and policy and correct theology, they lost sight of the heart and fulfillment of all those things, love. They'll know your mind by your love. Okay, let's wrap this up. We've talked about the why better communication, to connect, why to love. We've talked about the how, know your audience. How many times have you sat in a lecture, listened to a sermon, had someone go on, and you're like, make a point already. What am I supposed to do with what I'm hearing? And that's what I call the so what. Why on earth does this matter in my life today? So theologian and author Dallas Willard wrote The Divine Conspiracy, and I absolutely loved what he said about Jesus. Jesus never taught anything at all that the average Elsa couldn't take and put to use that very day. Jesus was always communicating in stories or parables that brought big, heavenly, transcendent ideas down to small, earthly, imminent practices. So here's your so what. Here's what you can actually do with what we've been talking about. This week, today, ask yourself the question, if I'm speaking or withholding my tongue, am I hurting or helping a situation? Am I seeking to better understand my audience, my spouse, my brother, my pastor, my teacher, my boss, my child? Or am I simply caring about what I think, what I have to say? Here's what you can look forward to in this communication series. We're going to talk about how to be a dynamic listener with my good friend QVC host, Sean Killinger. We're going to talk about how to stay open and curious with artist and poet Morgan Harper Nichols. We're going to talk about how we can use technology to actually connect with people. Pastor Andy Crouch is going to lead us in our thoughts there. And to wrap it all up, we're going to talk about how to live out the things you say, so very important here, with minister and activist Cece Jones Davis. Man, it's going to be a great ride. So I want to thank our team at Four Eyes Media, Laura, our executive producer, Amy Kerr, my producer, and Caitlin Hine for booking fabulous guests. And of course, I want to thank you for listening to my very first podcast episode. I so look forward to our time of connection as the weeks unfold. But in the meantime, live for what matters.
Thanks for joining Nancy for the very first episode of So What? Why It Matters. Come back next week for more lively conversation and answers to those so what moments in your life. And be sure to subscribe to the So What podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, please give us a review and tell us why. And if you don't, as Nancy would say, so what? Just kidding. All your reviews matter. So until next time, live for what matters.